Chapter 3. Jack. Jack tapped his half-empty packet of cigarettes against his drawn-up knee. He'd nearly thrown them away numerous times, but there were so few things he could touch and feel, that he hadn't been able to get rid of them. If only he'd managed to hang onto the bottle that day. What he wouldn't give for a drink. He winced as a group of girls passed the tree he leaned against, screeching and squealing excitedly. Make that several drinks. He tapped the packet against his knee one last time before he slid it into the sleeve of his t-shirt. Yet another birthday. More than 49 years had passed since the angel had sentenced him to remain at the school for 7 times 7 years. Obviously angels couldn't count. Stuck enduring his 18th all over again. But without all the screw-ups. How many times had he wished he could do that day over? He'd lost count. Far too many times. He sighed as he rose to his feet. What was the point of this? Wandering the same school day after day. It hadn't taken him long to realize that hell wasn't fire and brimstone. It was decades of sheer boredom. How many years were they going to ignore him? Forever? What was that overgrown bird thinking, ditching me here? That you'd have time to reflect on your sins. Jack swore as he spun to face the angel he hadn't seen for more than 49 years. And I couldn't have done that in less time? And what had happened to only 49 years? Can't you count? You're lucky it wasn't longer. There was a great deal of disagreement over whether or not you deserved a chance at redemption. And no, you couldn't have reflected on your sins in a shorter time frame. Not and have it sink in. Especially since a lot of those first few years were spent cursing everyone and demanding attention. The angel grinned. After the initial shock wore off, you were worse than a 2-year-old having a temper tantrum. I needed to know what happened to Rose. She certainly wasn't headed where you were. But she killed me. Self-defense is a different matter altogether. Now enough worrying about the sins of others. We need to discuss the atonement of yours. Jack's eyes narrowed as he stared warily at the angel. Atonement? The angel nodded. For every single sin. No matter how minor. What did angels consider sins? There were the obvious ones, like lying and the midnight auto supply. He was pretty certain the Bible mentioned something about not stealing. It was also very clear about murder being a sin. Thou shalt not kill. You couldn't get much clearer than that. And he certainly had 2 counts of murder to deal with. He guessed he should be grateful it hadn't been 3. But what about Chinese fire drills? Were they a sin? They'd only been a bit of a blast. Nothing much to get cut up over. He should probably add all the lies to the list. He didn't want to think about how many he'd told his father. In the end he'd stopped talking to him and left Frank to try and maintain communications on his own. He sighed. He guessed he'd better get started on the atonement business. It was probably going to take a while. What do I have to do? You'll be assigned people who are in need of help and guidance. Jack stared at the angel. I'll be what? The angel smiled slightly. You heard clearly. Guidance. Did you forget you're talking to a major screw-up? I barely made it to my 18th birthday. And look what a stuff-up I made of that. You've had years to figure out where you went wrong and what you should have done. More than 49 years, Jack muttered. Don't those extra years count for something? No. The angel smiled again, seeming unbothered by the accusation in Jack's tone. His hands curled into fists and he tried to calm his temper. He should have learned how to keep it under control by now. Maybe he'd figure that trick out in another decade or 2. Assignments. Does that mean I finally get out of this place? No. You'll be assigned students in need of help. Only your assignment can see or interact with you. Everything else will remain as it has always done. There went plans of getting a bottle of whiskey. Jack glared at the angel, but the effort seemed to go unnoticed. So who do I help? The angel gestured across the school grounds to the gaggle of girls who'd walked past him earlier. He indicated the girl in the middle of the group. Your first assignment. Her. He had to spend time with her while he was sober? Is there a problem? Would you rather spend an eternity in hell? It feels like I already have. This is a holiday in comparison. Jack glanced towards the girl again, wincing when one of her friends squealed at a teeth-grinding pitch. Fine. What have I got to do for her? If I have to hold your hand, I might as well do the job myself. Great. An angel with an attitude. The smile could only be described as angelic. The answer was anything but. You have your own sweet personality to thank for that. Jack growled. Haven't you got anything helpful to say? Yes. Play by the rules. I was thinking of something. He used his hand to fill in the temporary blank. You know. Helpful. Oh, you want helpful. The angelic smile remained in place. In that case, her name is Lucy. The angel vanished. Jack swore. Great. And that was so very helpful. He stared after the group of girls. And he had to deal with them sober as a saint. He grunted. Or an angel. How lucky was he? He rolled his eyes heavenward. Torture cannot be considered ethical, moral, or in the least bit angelic. There was no reply to his words. He was used to that. He'd had more than 49 years of being ignored. His gaze roamed over Lucy, who seemed to be parting from the annoying crowd she hung with. The chick might be stacked, but unless she came with a volume dial, he wasn't going to survive a week with her. He sighed as he strode after her. Now he just had to find a moment when she wasn't surrounded by the ear-bleeding horde she regularly hung with, before he approached her. Letting her talk to him when others were around might make her appear insane. He didn't need anything else to atone for.